Hi, hello, good morning and welcome to the last look that we're going to do in the week of Gilded Nirvana. Today's look is going to be focused a little bit on the last shade that we haven't really used at all for the look yet, and that is this one here. That is the shade Liquid Sky, which is a beautiful sparkly blur purple. Now, something I wanted to say about this shade has a bit more of like a sheer base to it, so I think this is one shade that would work really well as a topper. I do think it will work really well on its own, which is why today we're going to use it more to the capacity of a one and done shade, but I do think this is one of the shades in here that would work really well as a topper. I think it would work really beautifully with Cosmic Orchid, with Aquamarine Allure. Honestly, you can do quite a bit with it. And I noticed just coincidentally that Pat McGrath Labs posted a reel this morning where they actually combined the shade Liquid Sky together with the Subliminal palette. So I think the model was wearing one of like the neutral shades. They put the black in the crease, the beautiful Blitz blue shade all over the lid, and then they put a little bit of Liquid Sky over that blue shade, and it looked absolutely glorious. I do think this shade would look so transformative over a number of other eyeshadows. But let's just get started, and then I'm going to maybe share a few final thoughts with you while we do the look so that we can be a bit more efficient. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab something outside of the Gilded Nirvana palette, because I do want to line the roots of my lashes here with something a little bit deeper, and I think we're sort of going to kill two birds with one stone. This is a very deep shade of liner. It is a Kiko eyeshadow stick in the number 33. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know whether this still exists. Most of my Kiko eyeshadow sticks are very old. One of them had actually started to sting, so I had to toss it, and they are some of my favorites to use as a base or as a liner or in my waterline. So most of the time when you see something matching in my waterline, more often than not it is a Kiko eyeshadow stick that has long been discontinued. Anyway, this is a gorgeous, very hard to describe, like one of those beautiful like gray taupe purples that is a very complex shade, and I really like it. And I think because it fits really well with my clothing, and I think it could serve a little bit as a base for Liquid Sky, at least in the roots of my lashes, so that you can see what Liquid Sky looks like over a dark base. I think it will work really well with this look and with this eyeshadow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply a little bit of this willy-nilly here in the roots of my lashes, making it a little bit thicker and sort of winged out towards the outer portion of the eye. And I'm going to work one eye at a time, because once these set, they're a little bit more difficult to move around. But I'm just going to use a little fluffy brush here, synthetic bristles, and I'm going to reapply as needed. You see that when you start blending out, some of it comes off, and I'm going to apply just a tiny bit more here towards the actual roots of the lashes, so that that remains the darkest portion of the lid. And then if you want, you can even like use this like upwards flicking motion, so that you don't really disturb the color that's towards the roots of the lashes, but it really doesn't matter because we can always apply a little bit more. I'm going to repeat what I did on my other eye. In theory, I could have applied this as a base all over my lids, as like a cream eyeshadow base, and it would have looked beautiful, and I did consider that. But I really want you to be able to see Liquid Sky on its own. I think that's really the most important goal that we had this week, not so much to show you all the things that this palette can do, but more so to show you what the capabilities of this palette are if you were to use the individual shades as one and done, and you don't want to think too hard about it. And that brings me to a couple of final thoughts. So I'm going to start with the one huge con for this palette, something that I really do not appreciate, which is the two matte eyeshadows in here. Two matte eyeshadows is even a strong word, but let's count Mauve Mystique here as a matte eyeshadow, because the glitter mostly flies away. But you have Nude Nirvana, you have Mauve Mystique, they're both a bit rosy. Nude Nirvana is actually also quite pastel in tone, it's very light in tone, and I'm not even entirely sure that it would show up on anyone. I grabbed it to apply a bit more, but I changed my mind. You know what? I am going to apply a slightly bit more here on the lower lashes. So I don't really know that this shade would even work on someone with a medium skin tone, let alone a darker skin tone. I trust Pat McGrath Labs that she knows what she's doing, so maybe the shade works across different skin tones, but either way, it is not my favorite. Like, when you put so many colorful eyeshadows in a palette as this one, and then your only options for mattes are really rosy tones, and I think some people are going to approach this palette this way, I don't think you're going to truly enjoy the palette. I really think this palette, in terms of mattes, is missing something that is a little bit more neutral in tone. So if it had been up to me, I would have put a neutral brownie there. Think of something like Statuesque, or maybe something like Ultimate Taupe from the Subliminal palette, so that they would work with pretty much all of the eyeshadows that are in here. Speaking of all of the eyeshadows that are in here, now I'm going to grab Liquid Sky and I'm going to apply it on my lids just using my finger. And you can see how the shadow applies over the dark base, but also on its own when I bring it up towards my moving lid and a little bit into the crease. I'm just going to use this shade as sort of like a one and done, and I'm going to blend it out in a little bit. It's such a pretty shade because I think once you apply it on the lids and you see all the different flips, there is a lot of that like cornflower blue undertone that is my personal favorite when it comes to blue eyeshadows. I love cornflower blue, if you couldn't tell from the color of my earrings. So this may be one of my favorite blur pearls that Pat McGrath has ever made. It is very reminiscent of Interstellar Icon, the blue in Interstellar Icon, but I think the one in Interstellar Icon is not quite as cornflower once you apply it on the lids. I think that one is a little bit more blue. But to continue onwards what I was saying about the palette, I'm going to lightly blend out a Liquid Sky now through my crease. If we ignore the two matte eyeshadows and just focus on the statement shades, then I have no complaints about this palette. I think they're all beautiful, they're all very different from each other. A lot of them are so much more dimensional, as you've also seen throughout this week once you put them on your lids. I will say this though, do I think that a lot of the shades in this palette are truly unique? I don't. I will be completely honest. If you have an extensive Pat McGrath Labs collection, you can achieve a lot of these looks by using what you already have. FYI, I put a little bit more Liquid Sky onto my blending brush so that I can bring it up to the crease and upwards of the crease, because as you can see I have quite a bit of like space between my moving lid and my brow bone, so I have to bring shades pretty high up. When you look across this palette and you're an existing Pat McGrath Labs collection, say from someone who has been buying her makeup for a really long time, then Pink, what was this again? Pink Venus, Liquid Sky, Aquamarine Allure, Cosmic Orchid are shades that you can quite easily dupe with stuff that you already have. For example, I was thinking yesterday about the look that I did, and between Synthetica, which is very, very similar to Cosmic Orchid, maybe just a tad deeper, and Pink Venus here, that I could probably substitute with a duochrome from Celestial Odyssey that also flips from a pink to a gold, and whatchamacallit, I keep forgetting the name of that shade from Ritualistic Rose, the pink gold hard gelée shade. Between all of those, I could probably achieve a very similar look to what I had yesterday, so I wouldn't necessarily even need to have this palette to achieve this look. Of course, that brings me to the really unique shades in this palette. Golden Lurex, Bronze Aura, very unique shades. This one here as well, the shade Mauve something, Molded Mauve. I think this is a beautiful and really unique brown in Pat's collection, and I really wanted to have a brown like this from her, so I'm really happy to have it in this palette. Platinum Bronze is another one that I think you can very easily dupe if you go across Pat McGrath Labs' eyeshadows. So overall, I would say this is a mix between shades you already have and a couple of standouts that are rather unique to this palette. So can you see here over the dark base how much more intense the shift is? And then as I go upwards on my lids, because this shade has a very sheer base and I think it is mostly meant to be used as like a sparkly topper, it almost, I think, will appear if I turn my head in a certain lighting that there are bald spots on my lids. I do think it looks very ethereal and you don't absolutely need to have a base underneath it, but I do think this is one of those shades that might appear a little bit weird on the lids because the base color is so sheer. I just really think that even if you look at what's going on here over the Kiko dark base, I just think it looks so much prettier over the dark base than it does all over my lid on its own. But I really wanted to show you what it does on its own so that we can, you know, have an idea how it performs if it doesn't have anything underneath it. But I'm glad that we applied the dark base so that you can also see what that looks like. And of course, what else? We're going to grab Pink Venus here to complete the look. I'm going to use that as my inner corner highlight shade. I'm thinking now, I didn't really do glitter glue. You know what, let's do a little bit of glitter glue because we are experimenting here. I'm going to apply a tiny bit of that in my inner corners and my moving lid, just so we can reapply Liquid Sky over a glitter base to see what that does. So I think ultimately there are a couple of questions here. I think the most important one is, if you have tried the Queen formula, you need to consider whether that's a formula that you enjoy from her brand, because I think this is a bit of a divisive formula. Some people love it, some people hate it. Or hate is a strong word, I do think some people actually hate it. I'm going to reapply Liquid Sky over the glitter base. I don't know that that's really doing all that much, to be honest with you. Maybe slightly intensifying the color and the base, but that could also be just because I'm piling more color. Anyway, as you can see, really pretty. I think over a glitter base you're not really achieving much more than you would otherwise. I'm going to grab a little bit of Pink Venus. And I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, we were talking about the Queen formula. The Queen formula is not going to be for everybody. I've already spoken to so many people over the years about this formula that even though it is beautiful, impactful and very creamy, it just doesn't work for everyone, and that's totally fine. But I think if you have had previous experience with this formula and you have always found it difficult, not your favorite, and say you bought Luminous Legends last year and Luminous Legends just stands in your drawers never to be used, then I don't think you should buy this palette, because these formulas are not all that different from the ones in Luminous Legends. I think it's a step up that there were a couple of more difficult shades in Luminous Legends, but honestly we're talking about one tops 2 shades in there. Everything else was as creamy and as buttery as the eyeshadows that are in here. So I think ultimately if you do not get along with the Queen formula, you shouldn't buy this palette. So that's the first thing you need to ask yourself. Also, that actually looks really pretty, I really like that. I'm also going to apply a little bit of this Pink Venus shade. Ooh, I had an idea. But I'm going to grab a somewhat smaller brush for that. I am going to take a tiny bit of Cosmic Orchid here, and I'm going to apply that just here in the inner portion of the lid, like the lower lash line. The second thing you need to ask yourself, besides the formula, is how unique are these shades to your collection, and do you per se need to have them in this formula? Like for me, this palette brings something to my collection because I really like this formula, and I like having versions of Pat's eyeshadows in this formula. But if you don't care so much about the formula, you just care about the color, then you should really consider whether this brings anything new. Like, besides the few really unique shades in here, are you getting something more out of this palette that you were not already getting out of your existing Pat McGrath Labs collection? And of course, obligatory sparkle moment. Beautiful. I have the soft matte in caramel from Prada, if anyone was wondering what I had on my lips. And now let's continue on our train of thought. If you are chasing after unique eyeshadows from Pat McGrath like they are Pokemons, like I am, then I think you're going to like this palette, because there are a couple of, like I said, really standout, really unique shades, even if you look through her collection. I think if you have a large collection of multi-chrome eyeshadows from indie companies, you might have some of these already, but personally I'm happy to have them in the Italian Queen formula from Pat McGrath. The other thing I wanted to say is that I highly disagree that this palette is priced too highly. This palette costs 60 euros. You're getting 15 really high quality eyeshadows, not a single dot, really unique, really special shades in what I consider really beautiful packaging. This is plastic, but it is certainly not cheap plastic. And something that I think I failed to mention in my original video is that when you move the palette around, you will see that the gold element here with the little angels, and especially this portion here with what I'm not really sure whether it's supposed to be a ring or something else, is actually the whole thing is actually holographic. So the outside packaging is really stunning. There's a lot of thought that has been put into it. So if you consider the fact that you're getting 15 eyeshadows, beautiful packaging, high quality formula for 60 euros from Pat McGrath Labs, I'm sorry, but I disagree that this is a very expensive palette. I think this is a bargain, actually. yes, compared to Luminous Legends, which was quite a bit bigger, you're getting smaller eyeshadows, but Luminous Legends was housed in cardboard packaging, and that's the other thing. When Pat was putting these in cardboard, people were complaining. Now that she put them in fancier plastic, people are still complaining. So you can't make everyone happy, that is clear. But I personally think this is a gorgeous palette. I'm really going to enjoy it. I cannot actually wait to start using it together with Luminous Legends, because I already have ideas about certain eyeshadows that are really going to look so pretty together. And something that, of course, we haven't really done too much for the time being is just try layering some of these eyeshadows together with each other. I wanted to focus on the individual colors so that you can see what they look like together. But for example, I've been thinking about what would happen if you were to layer a little bit of Golden Lurex over the purple here, or, you know, there's a lot to play around with even with this palette still. We haven't done everything that this palette can. I just kind of showed you the absolute basics. And I think with this I'm going to wrap up this video and this week of Gilded Nirvana, because currently I have nothing more to contribute to the discussion. I've given you all of my considerations. What you're going to do with those is completely up to you. You just need to have a good idea how this palette places in your collection if you consider all of the points that we discussed earlier. I'm very curious what you think about it. Did this week convince you that Gilded Nirvana is something that you need in your life, or did you look at all of these pretty looks and thought, you know, I think I can enjoy this palette from afar? Because that's the other thing. I don't want you to think that because I enjoy this palette, because I look good in this palette and I enjoy this formula, you are going to as well. Sometimes it's okay to admire a product from afar. There are so many products out there that I know are really beautiful, but I know that they're just not going to be my favorite. They're not going to work out for me as they do for the person on the other side of the screen. So what I'm trying to say is, don't get carried away in my enthusiasm for this palette. And I'm saying that because I've had the personal experience of getting carried away with someone else's enthusiasm. When going into their video, I knew that the product isn't for me. So then ultimately I've always regretted my purchases. Whenever I've purchased something because someone else was excited for it but I wasn't, and then I got carried away in the enthusiasm of the other person, I've always ended up regretting my purchases. So I think you need to think about this a little bit more pragmatically, approach this from the perspective of your own personal taste, how this palette would place in your personal collection, and don't let my enthusiasm for it or the looks that I demonstrated with it to get you all excited, because don't forget, a lot of the looks that I did this week you can achieve with other palettes from Pat, or like even with other palettes in your collection. Like even the shade Golden Lurex, beautiful and unique as it is, yes, Lime Chrome from Natasha Denona is not quite the same shade, but it's pretty similar. So if you have the original gold palette, even Golden Lurex is not super unique on the market. And I'm pretty sure indie companies probably have a version of it. Anyway, I think I'm going to now really wrap this video up because I have to get going to work. I hope that you enjoyed this week. Now that we've completed all the 5 looks, please let me know which one was your favorite, or if you can't pick a favorite, you can give me your top 3. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video and this whole week, and we will see each other again very soon, because I haven't forgotten, I still want to come back and do a targeted video on Sable Rose from Louis Vuitton. I mentioned it briefly when I did the first look for this week that I had purchased a new refill for my Louis Vuitton lipstick, and I want to make a dedicated video for it, so I think that's the next video you're going to see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye!